Welcome to the 2020 International Workers' Day, which took place at the COMRADE OLALTAN complex at Labour House in Abuja. Unlike the pageantry that greeted May Day celebrations in the past, where the Eagle Square becomes a beehive of activities, this year's event was unusually low-key. The novel coronavirus pandemic, which has brought countries to their knees, is obviously responsible. No colored designs of attire by the various unions as usual. Above all, no march past, which usually climax all Labor Day celebrations in Nigeria and in most countries of the world. Despite the odds created by COVID-19, the 2020 May Day was however commemorated in compliance to physical distancing guidelines to contain the spread of the virus. Addresses of Mr. President MUHAMMADU BUHARI GCFR and that of the Minister of Labour and Employment were recorded and made available to Nigerians. Welcome again to the 2020 Workers' Day in Nigeria. Solidarity. Presentations by the representative of the DG NECA.
This May Day celebration is the first of its kind in our nation and in the labor movement. We, however, commend the resilience of organized labor for organizing this event in spite of the restriction placed on us because of the COVID-19 pandemic. We also highly commend the leadership of the labor centers and all the sectorial unions for their roles in protecting the interests of employers and their positive collaboration with employers in ensuring a productive and harmonious workplace. We hope that the result of our collaborative efforts will ensure that job losses do not continue and we're able to weather the storm of this pandemic. Once again, we congratulate you on this significant event, my comrade, President, and wish you all happy May Day celebration. Thank you and God bless you.
The address of the Honorable Minister of Labour and Employment, Senator Dr. Chris Nwabweze Ngige.
Today, May 1, 2020, is a different May Day. The stadia are empty, and there is deafening silence all over. We are all taking refuge in our respective homes and staying off the streets in a global bid to stay alive and beat an invisible enemy called coronavirus and her disease for the year 2019. We stay at home to minimize and eventually stop the spread of the disease and the infection, which has killed hundreds of thousands of people globally and dwindled life and economies. Offices and workplaces, businesses, small and large scales, and nations are all closed. The COVID-19 outbreak has laid siege on humanity, and we must all develop and imbibe a common will to fight and conquer this enemy. The COVID-19 outbreak has affected modes of work, and the utilization of teleworking is now on the increase. I therefore urge all of you to continue to do your best in that regard and to endeavor to demarcate your personal life from work as you work from home, although a little bit difficult. It is a well-known fact that arising from the COVID-19 crisis, businesses in both the private and public sectors have suffered. Sustainability of the enterprise has become a subject of concern to all. The worries precipitated by the COVID-19 crisis are further compounded by worries of maintaining a source of livelihood. In this regard, the government and social partners will have a look at the 4 pillars of policy responses to COVID-19 crisis laid out by the International Labour Organization, ILO, which are all intended to be human-centered and built on global solidarity. This will be in addition to the federal government's evolving plan of action to sustain the economy in the context of current global crisis. All relevant factors to the nation's workforce will be identified, analyzed, and solidified to ensure job retention and the continued realization of the same work agenda. In doing this, we will be guided by the labor standards as benchmark for social and employment protection. And at this time of vulnerabilities, this has to come to the fore. Along this line, talks are currently ongoing between the President's Economic Sustainability Committee, ESC, and employers on the issue of job protection and even job creation for this time and progressively to the post-COVID-19 period. I, as your minister in charge of labor and employment, wish to state that employers will not be encouraged to disengage staff or lay off staff without prerequisite social dialogue and clearance from the Ministry of Labor and Employment. And all those who have precautiously been beating the drums of another war in this direction are advised to perish the idea, at least for this period of the COVID-19. The Central Bank of Nigeria and the government of the Federal Republic of Nigeria will come out with some stimulus and relief package for employers to cushion the pains that has resulted as a result of this COVID crisis. I hail employees in the health sector, the medical doctors, and healthcare workers for their call to duty and selflessness to care for the sick and the dying when nobody wants to or is authorized to be proximal to them due to the nature of the COVID-19 infections. God bless you all who have so discharged your duties to humanity compassionately and dutifully. For being in the front line of this war with this invisible enemy, we praise you, and in appreciation, the government has introduced a special COVID hazard and inducement allowances at this time of COVID crisis. Also, there is a group life insurance policy which has been activated for all workers in the federal government public service, especially the health workers, as well as the employees' compensation for injuries, disabilities sustained, and for even death in the course of discharging these duties. Furthermore, government appreciation goes to the Health Workers Umbrella Union, the Joint Health Sector Unions, and for the medical doctors, the Nigerian Medical Association, NMA, for your professionalism and support at this time of global health crisis. I call on employees, especially those in the science, technology, and research sector of the economy, our academia. You are all enjoying to put on your thinking caps and join your colleagues throughout the world and produce cure and or vaccines for the COVID-19 for testing and other required processes and procedures. Madagascar and Senegal have done it, and they have produced something which have been subjected to integrity tests as we now speak. We can also do something greater or key into their knowledge to mass produce for the Nigerian populace. My dear Nigerian workers, let me conclude my 2020 May Day address to you by sharing with you the ILO laid out workers' response options to the COVID-19 crisis. 1. Efficient social dialogue at all levels is essential for quick and effective actions. Workers' organizations can play an important role in participating in decision-making and policy responses to the crisis of COVID-19. 2, to assist governments to make critical social, economic, and environmental protection policy decisions, such as how to save jobs without risking the health of workers, how to implement the necessary COVID-19 measures without destroying livelihoods, how to mobilize and allocate the human and financial resources necessary without excavating the national debt crisis, how to extend social protection to the most vulnerable and the needy, and how to protect incomes, jobs, and rebuild and reshape and reorganize the economic and social infrastructure and priorities beyond this crisis. Fellow Nigerian workers, as government moves to ease the lockdown, we wish to ask you for certain behaviors. 1, we wish you to encourage irresponsible behavior, cooperate with response measures, and stay calm. 2, promote solidarity and non-discrimination or stigmatization of sick workers or other sick persons. 3, since COVID-19 spreads mainly through respiratory droplets, good workplace hygiene and practices are essential. These practices, such as regular hand washing, using of hand and surface sanitizers, are encouraged and recommended. We must also reach out to UN country teams, especially resident coordinators, and offer solutions from a trade union perspective. Permit me to also inform you that on 29th of April 2020, we held a meeting of AU Commission Ministers of Labor in Africa, and the 52 ministers were all in this Zoom meeting, and all had praises for you workers, especially the health workers. And I want to convey their praises to you. I want also to convey their gratitude to you. In view of all these options for workers' response, we can all agree that the road to victory will require cooperation, togetherness, with social dialogue as a driving instrument. I wish to recognize the leadership of the 2 federations, Trade Union Congress and NLC, and I wish all of you God's divine mercy and protection as we all try to weather the difficult times that this time presents. I believe that we all staying together, comrades, and working together, we shall overcome. God bless you all. Long live the Nigerian workers. Long live the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Thank you very much.
May Day address by Comrade Dr. Ayuba Waba, MNI, President, Nigeria Labour Congress.
In the struggle for Nigeria, there is victory.
Labour veterans, our allies in the civil society, public office holders, political leaders, women and youth, and all people of goodwill, a very warm compliment in commemoration of the 2020 Workers' Day. Our world will never remain the same again. The contemporary world of work is in dire strain. There are even greater fears of the future of work. The International Labour Organization, ILO, has reported that the COVID-19 social lockdown measures have affected almost 2.7 billion workers worldwide. This represents around 85% of the workforce globally. In this circumstance, businesses across a range of economic sectors are facing catastrophic losses. The threat to operations and solvency among smaller enterprises makes millions of workers vulnerable to income losses and layoff. According to the Director General of the ILO, Brother Guy Ryder, this is no longer only a global health crisis, it is also a major labor market and economic crisis that is having a huge impact on people. A recent study by the ILO indicates that 25 million people will likely lose their jobs as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. The report also warns of severe job contraction in the informal sector, as the opportunity for people to be engaged will be highly restricted, given the restriction of movement in many countries. The report also forecasts huge incidences of income lost for workers. Up to about $3.4 trillion US will actually be the incidences of income lost. The report went on to predict that contraction in productivity will ultimately increase working poverty, affecting up to 35 million workers globally. Most of the endangered workers are those in the informal sector who live on daily income. Despite the challenges posed by COVID-19 pandemic, we are deeply enamored by the bravery and resourcefulness of our healthcare professionals who have put in their lives on the line to contain the spread of this deadly virus. In spite of the relevant deficit of material resources at their disposal, they have arguably recorded some best recovery rate in the world. We are immensely proud of the love, faith, courage, and sacrifice demonstrated by our frontline heroes and heroines who have certainly given more than the demand of call to duty. Our gallant frontline workers have served and continue to serve as the resolute buffer between COVID-19 and the mass infection come death. We will forever be indebted to thousands of our courageous health workers, transport workers, utility workers, journalists, and workers in the informal sector who has continued to show up at their duty posts despite the that of working tools, paucity of gratitude, and so on. We condole with the families of workers who have paid the supreme sacrifice in the fight against COVID-19, and also many of them that have been infected because of their desire to continue to protect life. We assure you that their labor will never be in vain. Comrades, while we want to appreciate also the fact that federal government has tried to incentivize some of the challenges, including the social insurance cover and also review of some allowances, we urge states to follow suit. We want to applaud states like Sokoto and other labor-friendly states for setting the pace for granting some percentage increase in the hazard allowance payable to health workers in the state. But other states must go beyond lamentation to also try to appreciate these workers, because there is no gainsay to say that we are a very critical time, and therefore globally these health workers are celebrated and also incentives given to them, including insurance cover, which the federal government have tried to lead. We wish to stress that such gesture should be equally bestowed on all health workers as members of one team fighting the deadly foe. Apart from the frontline health workers, especially the healthcare workers, millions of Nigerian workers are also fighting the COVID-19 battle from their homes. It is tough call adjusting to a new social regime of lockdown. Many workers are forced to telework from home using internet technology. We commend the compliance of workers and other Nigerians with the lockdown directive. That was a worthy contribution to fighting this pandemic. The coronavirus pandemic have raised a number of soft underbelly questions that we must confront as a nation and as a people going forward. Amidst the onslaught of the coronavirus, the dust raised by this pandemic has settled on the corrupt iron sheet of truth. How have we treated ourselves? How have we tested the weak and the vulnerable? How have we treated the weak and the most vulnerable? How has Nigeria treated her long-suffering workers? These are very pertinent questions that have been thrown up. It is on this note that we make the point that labor is not a commodity to be taken, trampled, and tossed aside. Workers create the wealth. It is not greed to demand a decent fraction of the reward of our efforts. We urge workers everywhere to continue to draw inspiration from the fact that without our sweat, no sweet gain can be made. Prognosis of the World Bank, these are really challenging periods. Anyhow, the slide of 5.1% has frightened the prospect for growth and job retention. As a result, the contraction will exert a devastating impact with accompanying recession. The economic impact on monoculture economies such as Nigeria, which depends on crude oil for nearly 90% of our foreign exchange earning, is very there. Crude oil production has declined due to lagged demand. As the price tumbled below 30-year cycle, hovering at times at sub-zero per barrel, compared to above the $60 just before the pandemic, Nigeria's federal government is experiencing a physical challenge, and this is very obvious. Consequently, the budget estimate for 2020 are in serious disarray. As the mainstay of Nigeria's economy, the falling price of crude oil in international market has severe implications for domestic consumption since the economy is largely import-driven. The crude oil price, which are far below the budgeted benchmark of $57 per barrel, presage rough times. The plan to reduce the expenditure obligations in 2020 budget confirms this fear. Unfortunately, the areas slated for reduction are those critical to human capital development. At a time, Nigeria needs to scale up the production of knowledge and demystification of scientific approach to address issues. The budgetary outlay for education and health are slated to suffer diminution. Many infrastructure projects are also being considered to be shelved or not fully executed in the current budget cycle. There is genuine premise to worry about possible threat to jobs retention, both in the public sector, private sector, and the informal sector of our economy. For instance, the closure of the airspace has seen gross interruption and the near absence of passenger traffic and the associated service in the aviation sector. This lockdown and physical distancing have reduced patronage of places of popular gathering. Workers in hotels, recreational and tourism segments will be severely impacted as their workplace have been largely shut. There is a cause to be anxious about the fate of workers in those critical sectors of our economy. Furthermore, the International Monetary Fund has estimated that Nigeria's economy will shrink by 3.4%, and the consequent recession could last up to 2021. God forbid this to happen. For a middle-income country like Nigeria, the hard-hit sector, which are the informal sector and the semi-formal sector of the economy, represent a high proportion of workers with non-fixed contract of employment and with limited access to healthcare services and social protection. We commend the House of Representatives for passing the Emergency Economic Stimulus Bill 2020 on the 24th of March 2020. The bill seeks to provide 50% tax rebate for employers and business owners who agree to retain existing staff in 2020. This is very laudable, and we urge other countries and even other employers to actually appreciate this gesture. In effect, the bill aims at prevent job losses in the formal sector. However, the exclusion of the informal workers from benefiting from this bill should be quickly addressed, especially given that over 70% of Nigerian workforce and businesses actually operate in the informal sector. Comrades, while appreciating also the fact that the Central Bank of Nigeria has proposed a $3.5 billion bailout stimulus package for small and medium-scale enterprises, manufacturing plants, and other vulnerable business concerns, we opine that stimulus package should also include the transport, aviation, hospitality sector, and the financial sector. Informal sector workers and artisans who earn their living on daily basis should also benefit from the stimulus package, and therefore they should work out a strategy where this very significant but important segment of our society can also benefit. We demand that the process of disbursement of the bailout package should also be inclusive, transparent, in consultation with organized labor and employers association, because we are sure that if it is transparent, then it will be able to meet up the expectation of many Nigerians. Liquidity crisis. Given the crunch in price of crude oil in the global commodity market, the government is clearly pressed for liquidity. Unfortunately, Nigeria's external reserve, which could have served as a physical shock observer, has been on the decline since June 2019. when it stood at 45 billion US dollars. From the Central Bank of Nigeria sources, as at January 2020, our external reserve was 38.61 billion US dollars. In February 2020, the reserve dropped to 37.5 billion US dollars. Just before the full bloom of the coronavirus pandemic in Nigeria, the country's external reserve took another dip to about 36.22 billion US dollars. Comrades, the implication of the liquidity crisis will be a shortfall in federal allocation to the subnational government. When this happens, the first casualty is always worker salary, not the white elephant projects that are going on, and also the retinue of convoys that follow our political appointees, and importantly also the high cost of governance in many of our subnational. The overbogo salary and allowances and other perks of office enjoyed by elected political office holders are hardly touched. We warn that the Nigeria Labour Congress will not take kindly to any attempt to offer workers as the sacrificial lamb for the inordinate emolument of public office holders and outright embezzlement of public funds by political elites. Debt overhang. Nigeria needs more than 6.9 billion US dollars in emergency funds from international lenders to deal with the COVID-19 challenge. The IMF, World Bank, and the African Development Bank and the Islamic Development Bank have been approached to raise the loans. According to the Bloomberg, the IMF is set to grant Nigeria an emergency fund up to the tune of 3.5 billion US dollars. In December 2019, Nigeria's external debt hit a 16-year high of 27 billion US dollars with a debt servicing commitment of 1.5 billion US dollars per annum. That is about 5% of our 2020 fiscal budget and 75% of our external reserves. As much as we need to deal with our liquidity challenges, we must also be very concerned that we are taking steady steps back to the stormy and murky waters of bad loan to Paris Club. It is very sad that our current total debt profile is almost at par with what we owe the Paris Club before the debt amnesty of about $18 billion from a total debt stock of 35.9 billion. Internally, our borrowing status leaves no cheers. CBN records show that the federal government borrowed over 4.4 trillion by way of means in 2019. This is far beyond our maximum of 4.5 billion allowed in the CBN legal status. There is nothing wrong in borrowing to finance development. Our worry as workers is that we are not seeing much of the development. We are largely borrowing to consume. Our hospitals are not being retooled with first-class facilities. Public schools still are eyesore to basic decency. Our roads network still does not support a 21st century economy. Apart from the renewed vigor in the railway system, which is commendable, the rest of our transportation infrastructure bodies are still in their need of development. So what exactly are we doing with this loan? It's something that we need to interrogate and also prioritize. Leakages in the pipeline. Related to the debt overhang is the contradiction in our petroleum sector. Our dependence on import refined petroleum products have left us perpetually broke. The Nigerian Labour Congress continue to shout itself hoarse that the roadmap of massive petroleum product importation is certainly a pathway to economic bankruptcy. No developed country will spend her scarce foreign exchange on the importation of refined products, especially petroleum products, as we do and will remain solvent. A few weeks ago, government reduced the pump price of petroleum motor spirit by about 18 naira, owing to over-recovery as dictated by the global plunge in the price of crude oil. Nigerian workers insist that it is anomalous to subject the price of a product sourced from Nigeria to the volatility of global commodity market. Nigerians should be the first partaker of the fruits of our resources freely given by God. To fix our leaking oil revenue pipeline, we must recover and resuscitate and revamp our refineries. The habit of being penny wise, pound foolish must end. It is not rocket science to fix all refineries. The technology for modular refineries is handy. We cannot rely on the promise of private refineries to fix the shame of being the only OPEC country that does not refine her crude oil. Furthermore, we must deal with the inefficiency and the corruption in the oil sector. The time is now. The current plunge in the price of crude oil may be our last warning to take full control of our oil resources and genuinely diversify our economy. The future of work. About 6 months ago, at the 4th National Leadership Retreat of the Nigerian Labour Congress in Enugu, we were discussing the strategy and strategizing on the future of work. Our major concern to us was the role of information communication technology, especially with regard to advanced internet service, 5G technology, robotics, and artificial intelligence in reshaping the world of work. Owing to the prevailing COVID-19 challenges, it appears the future was suddenly fast coming and forwarded. New phases such as teleworking have been introduced in our work lexicon. Leveraging on advancement in internet capabilities, work is now going on in virtual spaces. And this we must key in as Nigerians and also Nigerian workers. Meetings and conferences are being held real-time over smart applications such as Zoom and Smart and Skype. Nobody will grow our economy for us. It is only Nigerians and Nigerian people and government that will grow the economy. The reality is that capital mobility will be a lot harder in the next few years following the COVID-19 pandemic, as richer countries are also struggling to build their own economy, because the twin challenge of the COVID-19 is both in the area of health, that is morbidity and mortality, but also in the area of economy of most countries. The Naira has taken some hit in the course of COVID-19 onslaught, especially with the run on our external reserve. Now is the time to grow the Naira. The best way to defend our local currency is to produce what we consume. We must recover our industrialization set. We must bring back our factories. We must rally around our local rice, tomato paste, palm oil, vegetable oil, pasteurized milk, textile, leather, and other goods that can be easily manufactured in our country. We can manufacture some of the materials used in the battle to fight COVID-19, including face mask, test kit, personalized protective equipment, ventilators, and therefore government will provide the enabling infrastructure and policy framework to drive this very wonderful initiative. In the bid to grow our economy and bolster the Naira, we must pay critical attention to the recovery of our downstream petroleum subsector. Now is the time to hold a national conversation on the resuscitation of our 4 national refineries. Workers will resist any further attempt to transfer the cause of governance inaptitude, corruption, and inefficiency in the downstream petroleum subsector to poor Nigerians. We can no longer go on wasting precious foreign exchange reserve in the name of importing refined products. This so-called under-recovery cost or petroleum subsidy are basically the cost of shipping and demurrage, which will be eliminated once we start local refining. Also, the whole fuel subsidy regime remains opaque. Nigerians are yet to be told the mechanism for the recent reduction in the price of petroleum motor spirit. Nigerians are wondering why the price of other derivatives of crude oil, such as kerosene, diesel, did not benefit from the unilateral reduction in the pump price of petroleum products, if actually the basis of doing so is looking at the fall in the price of crude oil globally. We also warn that government cannot outsource carbon governance to one private refinery. We need our 4 public refineries and even more to be up and running, as this will provide the perfect competition for locally produced petroleum derivatives. While we welcome the emergence of private refineries, we implore government to respect the provision of Chapter 2 of our Constitution, which mandates government to take control of the commanding heights of our economy, especially our mineral resources. And that provision also forbids government from putting our common wealth in the hands of few. Government will always have business in business. We must diversify our economy. These trying times teach us we must now genuinely diversify our economy and create more decent jobs. The current plunge in crude oil price may be our last warning. There are many untapped opportunities in our agri value chain that can help in jumpstarting our economy. We also have a gold mine in the information communication technology. The world is moving fast in IT. We cannot continue to sit back as mere spectators. We must support our entertainment industry, which provides a means of livelihood for the teeming mass of our people, especially the youth. This is the time to wear our collective survival for the uncertain juice of crude oil. The diversification of our economy required a robust investment in modern and enduring infrastructure. If we aspire to build 21st century economy, we must be inspired to build the consumerate infrastructure of good importance in this regard, and that is in the power sector. It is scandalous that our total national electricity generation is still less than what the city of New York generates on a daily basis. We call for an urgent review of the power sector privatization program, which has turned out to be the fraud of this century. We demand a stop to the exploitation on electricity consumers in Nigeria through estimated billing. We also call for the expansion and improvement of our existing roads, network rails, to make sure that there are infrastructures to actually drive development. Expand and strengthen the social safety nets. While we commend the federal government and many state governments for offering palliative to poor Nigerians during the period of this lockdown, we call on government to expand and strengthen the social security safety net by capturing more poor Nigerians, especially the urban poor and the working poor, particularly workers in the informal sector who depend on daily income for survival. We also demand that the entitlement and needs of our pensioners, of whom we are highly indebted for their services, and with the challenge of COVID-19 and its facility, it's high time also to try to recognize the enormous contribution of these very senior citizens by ensuring that their entitlements are paid as and when due. Comrades, we must also look at the issue of national developmental planning. The socio-economic turmoil generated by the COVID-19 crisis must jolt us to return to national development planning. Nigerian workers are worried by the constraint imposed by the dearth of deliberate planning of our national economy. For many years, these have not been very effective. We urge all tiers of government in Nigeria to make deliberate effort to return to national development planning. The advantage of doing so are so many, including fixing the weak planned budget link and thereby addressing the poor coherence in program and project implementation. There is need for systematic and credible monitoring of the implementation of development of programs to ensure that they meet the set target and service identified needs. One thing is sure, a post-COVID-19 world will severely punish any crime that fails to effectively plan. Anti-corruption fight and physical discipline. With the dwindling resources available to our government and even the threat to jobs all over the world, the issue of accountability and transparency is now being called to re-examination. Because at this time, comrades, we must also ensure that every kobo counts and every kobo is accounted for, and that whatever we budget for should be able to meet the target that is budgeted for. Corrupt persons in and outside government must be dutifully tracked and diligently prosecuted. And that's why we said that, and we have to re-echo this call to say that part of how to make this effective is also to have dedicated courts that will actually try corruption cases. That will fast-track the process, and that will also make it very effective and will be able to discharge cases in very good time. We must also try to continue to work on the challenges of insecurity, and it is also high time for us to end the cycle of insecurity. We receive with delight the information from our military high command that the Nigerian Defense Forces are in the last phase of the battle against Boko Haram terrorists. While we salute the effort and the sacrifice of our armed forces, we urge them to make their promise good this time. Nigerians, especially those in the Northeast zone, cannot wait to get a feel of what it means to live a normal life again, free from the vagaries of guns, bombs, and mortars. Our military, the police, civil defense, and the intelligence corps must also not lose sight of internal insurgencies and violent crimes, especially kidnapping, herdsmen's violence, cattle rustling, armed robbery, and communal clashes. We urge our security forces to bring back the peace in our cities, towns, and villages. Now is the time to restore our rural economy, communal living, and peaceful coexistence. The emergence of regional security office must bring solution and not exacerbate the current security blues in our country. We commensurate with Nigerians, especially workers who lost their dear ones, got injury, or lost their means of livelihood amidst the insecurity in our country. May their sacrifices not be in vain. We commend our security personnel for the risk they have taken while enforcing the lockdown in different parts of Nigeria. Many of our security agencies were professional in their discharge of their responsibility. We call on government to ensure that those hardworking men and women are motivated with necessary logistic and adequate protective wares. We also call on the high commands to ensure that overbearing officers are not given opportunity to make use of this opportunity and continue to cause havoc. Comrades, it is important at this time for me to look at managing the emerging trend and particularly the challenge of post-COVID-19 in the industrial relation milieu. One of the biggest impact of COVID-19 health challenge and economic challenge is the issue of massive job losses. In the United States alone, nearly 30 million Americans filed for unemployment benefit at the peak of the pandemic. There had never been such a surge of the army of unemployed in the US since the Great Depression. The government of the United Kingdom offered to make up a substantial part of the wages of workers whose employments cannot be kept with their salaries. In some cases, up to 80% of these workers were affected. In Nigeria, some private firms have started laying off workers. We recognize that the gender vector of this development tilts against women. We appeal to private and informal sector employees to weigh in on the sacrifices made by these workers to keep all of us safe, because it has grave implications if we continue to throw workers, especially women, out of their jobs, because they are also breadwinners. We ask our employers to reciprocate and show some solidarity with the sacrifice of workers by ensuring wage protection, income support, especially through paid leaves and sick leaves. This is not the time to stop or deduct from worker salary. Such will be illogical and illegal, as worker salary are core elements of employment contract and collective bargaining agreements. We have asked our affiliates and state council to resist any salary deduction on the account of COVID-19. We also call on state government who have not negotiated with workers on the salary adjustment, especially the consequential adjustment of minimum wage, to also continue to do this in good faith. On May Day like this, we remind ourselves of the cardinal lesson of COVID-19 pandemic. We are all humans. We are all in this struggle and challenge together. We will be more homeric to slave drivers who treat workers as subhumans through casualization and anti-unionization. We warn such employers that they must continue to desist from this ugly trend, because our laws and international laws do not support this workers' slavery. Comrades, let me also look at how we can be able to leverage on the challenge of COVID-19 to now restart the Nigerian economy. We understand the public health imperative for the lockdown in many parts of the country. As much as it is important to keep many Nigerians from the coronavirus, loss of income and accompanying destitution can also be a pathfinder for numerous other sicknesses and death. This is the time to play the balance game. It is gratifying that President MUHAMMADU BUHARI, in his last nationwide broadcast on COVID-19, announced an imminent relaxation of the lockdown in Abuja, Ogun, Lagos. The truth is that our economy may collapse into prolonged coma if the total lockdown in many parts of our country persists. Lockdowns are best effective in the short time. In the medium to long time, the human instinct to survive will kick in, and restraint may lead to the collapse of law and order. We must call for a smart, gradual, and evidence-based restarting of the economy, and that's why NLC have appreciated the fact that the gradual opening will certainly be an opportunity to also rethink our economy. Aware of the backlash of the COVID-19 stigmatization, Nigerian Labour Congress will embark on a nationwide education and awareness campaign to discourage the stigmatization of workers and Nigerians who were COVID-19 victims. We urge every Nigerian to treat COVID-19 survivors as heroes and heroines. Such noble gesture will encourage infected cases to boldly come forward, knowing that they will not be stigmatized. This kind of response is crucial in preventing a second wave of COVID-19 in Nigeria. We need all hands to be on deck in this regard. International solidarity. The Nigerian Labour Congress and International Trade Union Confederation condemns the current brickbat and blame game on COVID-19. This is not the time to trade blames. Right now, what is important are common action to defeat the common enemy and also defeat the pandemic. This is not the time to withdraw support from commitment to global institutions. COVID-19 does not recognize borders. The action of world governments must reflect this. We are in this struggle together, and therefore we must work together to address the challenge. Given the lesson of sheer humanity as exposed by COVID-19 pandemic, we call for the removal of trade embargo and sanction against Cuba, Venezuela, and other countries who are being punished for the ideological stand of their leadership. We commend the government of Cuba for continuing in the fine tradition of medical solidarity to many countries where the fire of COVID-19 is raging. Your invaluable gift of life is stamped in so many hearts, and this is highly commendable. We call for the release of trade union leaders and activists in prison. Top on the list is President Lula da Silva. Recent political development in Brazil affirm his innocence. We also call for the release of our comrades held by government of Cameroon because of their political conviction. We cannot end this May Day speech without drawing attention to the cause of the Sahrawi Republic, Africa's last colonial outpost. We call on all African and world governments to keep up the pressure on Morocco and France until people of Western Sahara get their independence. In conclusion, while we commend the contribution of corporate Nigeria, big businesses, and other public-spirited Nigerians to the COVID-19 mitigation fund, we want to call on our political leaders to demonstrate leadership and goodwill at those trying times. Many of our political leaders declare humongous amount as assets and liquidity before assumption of their current positions. We want them to assist the poor from their accumulated wealth instead of exerting the poor through salary deduction. It is also important to commend the good work being done by the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, chaired by Secretary to the Government of the Federation, for the good work they have been doing and working round the clock to ensure that all Nigerians are safe. This has helped to bridge the information gap and keep many Nigerians abreast with the current information on COVID-19. In the same breath, we also commend the work being done by the National Center for Disease Control, NCDC, all over the country to control this ugly pandemic. I want to end the May Day 2020 May Day speech by eulogizing the immense sacrifice of Nigerian workers during this lockdown. We cannot thank our frontline workers, particularly our healthcare workers, our journalists, our security agencies, our paramilitary, for their unquantifiable sacrifice and contribution to fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. Fellow workers, your compliance with the stay-at-home order was a valueless contribution to the COVID-19 challenge. I salute our veterans, pensioners, allies for holding forth despite all odds. We are certain that this will soon pass. Until we meet at work, please stay safe. Long live Nigerian Labour Congress. Long live Working Class Solidarity. Long live International Workers' Solidarity. Long live the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Solidarity forever.
Address of His Excellency, the President, Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Today, 1st May 2020, Mr. President gave the message as follows. He says, greetings to Nigerian workers. Today is 1st May Day, but today we know that something is not right, not just in our nation, but globally. Today is a day set aside for workers to celebrate the success of their historical struggles, to have a voice in the world of work. It is equally a day to celebrate their partnership with relevant stakeholders, to achieve sustainable development and contribute to the progress of nations in contemporary times. It is a day to mark and acclaim workers' productivity in nation building. But today, May 1, 2020, the usual pomps and pageantry, characterized by sounds of drumming and march past by various trade unions and their federations, are missing in all the stadia throughout the federation, including our Ego Square Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. This is so because we are fighting an invisible enemy to humanity named COVID-19. This COVID-19 has come in a form of pandemic and is global. In a bid to win this war, our government set up a presidential task force, PTF, made up of the relevant sector ministers and highly skilled health technical experts. The government had, in a well-designed expert-advised lockdown some states of the Federation where this pandemic is most prevalent. The Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, Ogun, and Lagos states. Lagos was and is still the epicenter of the disease. Of late, Kano State had to follow suit because of the new eruptions of COVID-19 in that state. Offices, businesses, and various forms of outdoor activities have been put in abeyance so that we, as opposed to I, factor may prevail so that we may live for tomorrow. Yes, it is a common problem and interest, and it is at this time that we must be our brother's keeper by ensuring that I protect myself and protect others from me. I therefore ask Nigerian workers, both in the public and private sectors, with our formal and informal economy, to bear the stringent measures that have been put in place for a while for our common good. This will enable us to put the ravaging pandemic under control and restore normalcy within the confines of relevant guidelines issued by health experts and the government for safety against COVID-19 in order to curtail its spread. I acknowledge that it's not an easy time, but nations globally are in a state of war against this pandemic, and in a war situation, survival is paramount. Though the lockdown has been partially lifted in some states, aforementioned, with effect from 4th of May, except for Kano State, workers are enjoined to observe subsequent rules and regulations issued to ensure the safety of all Nigerian citizens. I understand the anxiety which has plagued the minds of workers all over the Federation over the possibility of job losses due to economic downturn caused by the pandemic and lockdowns, especially in the private sector. In this regard, government will ensure that no employer in both the private sector and public sector will retrench or lay off workers without going through the due process of social dialogue, which includes consultations with our workers and with the competent authority, in this respect, the Federal Ministry of Labor and Employment. Same goes for renegotiation of collective bargaining agreements in terms of salaries and wages. Furthermore, I earlier put in place a Presidential Economic Sustainability Committee, ESC, with the objective of developing a credible, sustainable plan for repositioning the Nigerian economy now and post-COVID-19 crisis period. The ESC is required to specifically explore ways and means of growing our non-oil sector, all in a bid to minimize the adverse effects of the current crisis, and to also protect existing jobs and even create new jobs to help absorb the teeming army of the employers. I conclude by expressing my appreciation once again to the medical doctors and healthcare workers, as well as their respective organizations, the Nigerian Medical Association and the Joint Health Sector Unions, NMA and JOHESU, respectively. These health workers are doing a great service for humanity. I thank you all. I have directed that requisite incentives in terms of hazard allowances, enhancement, and insurance for lives should be taken seriously at these perilous times in favor of all our health workers as a way of showing our appreciation to you. Also, personal protective equipment, PPE, for you is also guaranteed at this period. Great Nigerian workers, your resilience in times of adversity is not questionable. I appreciate you all, and I know that with collective will and sense of responsibility as a team, we shall triumph as a nation. Great Nigerian workers, your resilience is good and is commendable, and we so recommend it to other aspects of our productive economy. We ask you to observe all the health protocols as already established by the World Health Organization in terms of hygiene, washing your hands with soap regularly, observing social distancing, and staying safe. God bless all of you. Long live the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Long live Nigerian workers. Thank you.
The 2020 Labor Day will be most remembered for its unusual commemoration occasioned by the outbreak of the new coronavirus pandemic. Long live the Nigeria Labour Congress. Long live the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
There is victory for us. Forward, forward, ever, backward, never, in the struggle for our lives there is victory. He's a little. He's a little. He Africa. He Africa.